on this edition of Let's Talk Cincy.
Freedom Riders were testers. All of the legislation that was passed to end segregation throughout the Deep South, but it was not being adhered to.
Remembering a courageous civil rights freedom rider, Betty Daniels Rosemond. From WLWT, this is the Emmy Award-winning show, Let's Talk Cincy. Presented by Western and Southern Financial Group. Put our financial strength behind you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Curtis Fuller, and welcome to this special edition of Let's Talk Cincy, a tribute to Betty Daniels Rosemond, who passed away recently at the age of 86. She helped change this nation, fighting the evils of racism and segregation. A remarkable life. Here's her story in her own words.
Well, I really loved my mom, and in New Orleans, you know, everything was segregated. My mom, we had separate schools, supposedly separate but equal, but they were not equal. We walked to school every day, the black children. My mother wanted to vote, and she had been down to try to register. Black people in New Orleans could not vote during that time unless they owned property. She didn't own property. So she would go and try to register, and they would give them a test. And the test had questions like, how black is midnight? How many stars are in the sky? And the test was designed for failure. So nobody could answer that. So black people were being turned away, and they wouldn't even consider it if they didn't have property. And I was in high school, so I would come home from school and my mom would be in tears. And she really wanted to vote, but she was unable to do it. So I decided, I heard one evening I came home and I heard a young man on TV. He was talking about CORE, and CORE was aware of all these things happening in the Deep South and what people were going through. So they decided they were going to come to New Orleans. They were going to organize a CORE chapter there. Their headquarters was New York. So they were going to come and set up a meeting and try to help change some of the situations in New Orleans. So I made up my mind that when CORE comes, I'm going to go to their meeting and try to join, because I wanted to make sure my mother had a chance to vote. Well, it was when the first Freedom Ride, the group left Washington. They were headed for New Orleans. They were coming to New Orleans to help set up. And you remember that the bus was bombed in Alabama, Anniston, Alabama. And what people don't know about the first Freedom Rides, it was a mixed group of students, but on the buses, a lot of people don't know that they were not chartered buses. They were buses that you would go and buy a ticket. I'll get to that in a minute. And there were other people on the bus. So when that bus left Washington, headed for New Orleans, that bus was bombed in Alabama. Someone tossed a firebomb on it, and there were 13 young people on there, Freedom Riders, and there were other passengers on the bus. And there was a young man that was a part of CORE. His name was Hank Thomas, Jr. He's very well known in the civil rights movement, and they've named a street after him in Atlanta. I got to know Hank, he's our friend. And he managed to get the door open on the bus when the bus started burning, and they managed to get out. But as you well know, they were beaten down and things began to happen. The President Kennedy at that time wanted them to turn back and stop this. He didn't want the movement to,
This was
begin.
1962.
Yeah. So anyway, eventually some of them did get to New Orleans. Some of them were sent back to Washington, but they were really beaten down. And they would have died on that bus if Hank hadn't got the door open. So that was my deciding factor. When they organized in New Orleans, when they eventually got there and began to try to organize CORE there, I went to the meeting, and we had to be trained. You couldn't just join CORE. You had to go through nonviolent training. The civil rights movement was nonviolent, and you had to be nonviolent in order to participate. And I want to say this, that it was a motivation. We could not stop. I tell people when I speak, it was a motivation from God. We couldn't stop. Once we started, there was no way we could turn around. And I speak for myself, but if you could talk to some of the other CORE members, they would tell you the same thing. Every time we boarded a bus to leave home to go on a freedom ride, we didn't know if we would ever return home. And it was very hard because I would have to tell my family, I will see you later, or I'll see you in the morning, and we're going to Alabama, we'll be back tomorrow. But it was very hard because we knew the chances were that we may not be returning. We went on a freedom ride, 5 members of New Orleans CORE, and I was part of that group that night. We went to Birmingham. Freedom Riders were testers. All of the legislation that was passed to end segregation throughout the Deep South, but it was not being adhered to. There were laws, there were bills that were passed, but there was still segregation going on. So we went on a freedom ride. It was 4 young ladies and 1 young man. He was a white student. He joined our CORE group. His name was Frank Nelson Jr., and he came from California down to New Orleans to help with our group. We went to Birmingham, testing along the way. On the way back from Birmingham, we didn't get served at any of the white restaurants or anything in the bus station. We came to a little town in Mississippi. It was called Poplarville, Mississippi. Now this little town already had a reputation. This little town had had a lynching there maybe a year before the freedom rides. And the young man was a black man that lived there. His name was Charles Mack Parker Jr. And he was accused of looking or whistling at a white woman in a store, and he was brutally beaten. He was murdered, and he was thrown in the Pearl River in Poplarville. Now, Poplarville is a small little town, and it's still there, but I don't go through Poplarville. We stay on the interstate because the history is, on the way back from Birmingham, it was around 8 o'clock that night when the bus pulled into Poplarville. The riders on the bus had assignments. My assignment on that ride was to make a phone call if anything happened along the way. I was to call New Orleans CORE and let them know what was going on. The 2 girls and Frank got off. They were to get off and go into the bus station and test to see if they would be served. We were on the bus, the other 2 girls and I, and the 3 of them went into the station. A few minutes later, truckloads of men, white men, pull up. They ran into the bus station, and they literally drugged Frank and the 2 young girls. They were black students, drugged them out of the bus station, threw them in the back of the pickup truck, and drove off. I'm still on the bus looking out the window, and the other 2 girls. Now, I have to make a phone call. I want to tell you, we didn't have cell phones back then. How do you make a phone call without a phone? I saw a phone booth, a walk-in phone booth across the road. I got off the bus, I walked over to that phone booth to make my call, and the bus driver was watching the whole time. He saw what I was doing. While I'm in the phone booth, the bus driver pulled off and left me. The two girls on the bus, Frank and the other two, I'm not knowing where they're taking them. And my worst fear was that they were probably gonna kill them. I made the call to New Orleans. While I'm in the phone booth, another mob started running up and down on the other side of the road. And I could hear what they were saying, so I'm sure the bus driver must have told people as he drove off that another person got off the bus. So they were looking for me. I could hear their comments, and I stooped down in the phone booth. I don't know if you're familiar with these big old walk-in phone booths. And I was very small at that time. I was under 100 pounds, and I stooped down in the phone booth and I made a call. But before I dialed New Orleans, and I'll tell you this, you better call you don't call 911, I call 111. One for the Father, one for the Son, and one for the Holy Ghost. So I was praying and asking God to help me, because I knew if they found me, I would be another victim in the Pearl River. I stayed down on the phone, in the bottom of the phone booth. They were running up and down, and I could hear their comments, but they were across the road. A man walked out of the station. There was a gas station a little further behind me. And the guy walked out, and he came to the end of the road. He walked past the phone booth. He was an elderly black man that worked there. And he stood there and he looked for a while at the commotion. And on his way back, I managed to get his attention. And I told him, I said, I'm a Freedom Rider, and the bus is gone, and they're looking for me. And he told me to stay down. I said, can you help me? And he said, stay down, I'll see what I can do. I heard him ask two men in the station, can I use the truck? He said, I have an emergency at home, can I use the truck? And they let him use the truck from the station. Now, he must have been accustomed to doing that. He pulled near the phone booth. He told me to get in, stay on the floor. He said, I'll take you to the main interstate, and maybe you can get a ride on to New Orleans. I was telling him in the truck where I had to go. We got to the interstate. Now this I'll always remember. He was praying in the truck as he drove. And he was saying, Lord, tell me what to do, Lord. Help me. I have 8 children. Lord, tell me what to do. I can't put her out on the highway. And I'm on the floor of the truck. We got to the interstate, and he wouldn't put me out. He said, I can't put you out. I'm gonna take you all the way. And he did. So he took me all the way to New Orleans, which is 75 miles. Made a call to Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy was the Attorney General. And we learned that Bobby Kennedy called Poplarville, Mississippi that night and let them know he had all the details. We were told that he told them if anything happened to those 3 young people, he would have the troops in Poplarville in the morning. So they didn't kill them. The next day, they decided they were going to try them instead. 8 carloads of people from New Orleans, Corps members and other people, went to Poplarville for the trial. And I got back in a car and went up too, because I wanted to know that they're okay, you know. So they tried them, and they fined them, and they let them go. So we picked them up, and the 8 carloads drove back to New Orleans. But I want to tell you this, when we got to the state line, we were being followed from Poplarville by carloads of people from Poplarville. When we got to the state line, it was lined all the way with Louisiana Highway Patrol. And I was so thankful to see all those patrolmen lining the highway and waiting for us, so they knew we were on the way back. So that's what happened in Poplarville. I have no desire to go back to Poplarville, even though I know, you know, I have no desire. When I go home and I see the exit saying Poplarville, I don't want to get off. I pray for them, and I wish them well, but what happened there and what we went through and what God knows everything. What we see, Curtis, he sees already, and he knows before we know it how it's going to end. So that's what happened in Poplarville, Mississippi. So the Freedom Rides, we traveled throughout different states, and we were testing. We went to Texas, I went to Virginia, all throughout Alabama, and as we tested, but nobody was going to serve us. So there was segregation everywhere. I can remember in Alabama, we pulled into a station, a restaurant, and it was storming. And when the guy saw that we were black in the car, he ran out with the Confederate flag, and he climbed the pole to hang that Confederate flag. And we sat in the car and we watched him, and then he turned and looked at us and pointed to that flag like, you get the message, you know. In Virginia, when I went to Alexandria, Virginia, and that's why
right outside of the...
Right across from Washington. You can almost see the Capitol. You could see across the river. But Alexandria, Virginia was segregated back in those days. And we went to Alexandria, and one of the Corps members from California, she was a white girl, and we tested by going downtown Alexandria to a restaurant. We went to the restaurant and we were told to leave, but we knew we had to do what we had to do. We knew we would be arrested. So we didn't leave, we refused, and we were arrested. And we spent 3 days. I spent the weekend in jail, and she did. Even the jail was segregated because she was in one cell and I was in another. And we begged to be put together because we didn't know it was dangerous, but we knew if we died, we died. We were sentenced 6-month jail sentence, and we were fined a couple of $100. We were represented by Corps, and they made an appeal to the Supreme Court. Our case went to the Supreme Court, and we didn't have to go back to Virginia to do that time. But you know, for Virginia to be right across from D.C., the capital, and yet segregation there. And there was segregation everywhere. Corps members, there were 480 civil rights freedom riders, and they were from all over. If you go on roll call and put in freedom riders, you're gonna see 480 names. My name is still on there. But they came from everywhere, and they were not gonna stop until things were changed. God was always in the civil rights movement, and I hope people always know that. But Dr. King was a man sent. I met Dr. King, me and my sister. I shouldn't tell you this, how we did it. We were in school. Dr. King was very active in civil rights. And he was coming to New Orleans to speak. But the city of New Orleans would not let him use the municipal auditorium. And the longshoremen, the labor union, the longshoremen had a longshoreman union hall. So they had him at the union hall one day. Now, I wanted to see Dr. King, so my sister and I were in school.
You skipped school?
We snuck out of school. Young man, you're not hearing this, but it was very important that I got to see Dr. King. So my sister and I, we went downstairs to the basement, and we managed to go out one of the back doors of the school. And school was going on. And we ran back all the way back to the Union Hall. They wouldn't let us in. They had people at the door. They wouldn't let any kids in. So we stood on the sideline. We said, we're gonna wait till he come out. When Dr. King came out, we were yelling his name so loud. And he saw us, and he came over. But I wanna tell you, Curtis, he fussed at us. He scolded us. He shook his finger at us. He said, how come you're not in school? And we said, we wanted to see you, Dr. King. We wanted to see you. And he said, well, that's good. He said, but I want you to stay in school. That is more important. He patted us on the head, and he thanked us, but he told us, stay in school. So he really, education was important to him. And he wanted to make a difference for everybody. And there was nobody greater, in my opinion, in the civil rights movement than Dr. King.
Well, that does it for the program today. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Curtis Fuller. I'll see you next time for another edition of Let's Talk Cincy. Until then, have a good day and a better day tomorrow.